Hey guys, tonight we descend into the desert hush of an Egyptian twilight where the air is thick with the scent of sweet myrrh and the soft rumble of the Nile hums in the distance. You're standing in a quiet stone chamber lit only by flickering oil lamps, and on the floor before you is a rock. Not just any rock, but a smooth, curved headrest carved from alabaster. Yes, that's your pillow tonight. Your spine already aches in protest. You probably won't survive this. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment with your location and local time. I love seeing where in the world you're winding down. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You kneel beside the ancient bed, and it's nothing like your memory foam mattress at home. No feathers, no cushions, just a woven mat stretched over a wood frame, and center stage, a crescent-shaped piece of polished limestone meant to cradle the curve of your neck. Because in ancient Egypt, that was the high life. Egyptians believed the head was the seat of spiritual essence, like a Wi-Fi hub for your soul, and it needed to be elevated even during sleep. The stone headrest wasn't about comfort, it was a spiritual docking station. And yes, there are entire museum collections dedicated to these. Archaeologists find them buried with pharaohs and farmers alike, often decorated with protective spells or carved with the face of Bes, the dwarf god of dreams and household protection. Some were even made of wood or ivory, but those were fancy stone was the everyman's pick. Not because it was cozy, but because it lasted. Imagine trying to get REM sleep on a neck-sized ankle weight. Still, historians argue whether these headrests were always used during sleep or if they were mostly ceremonial, placed beside the dead to support their heads in the afterlife. Some scholars believe they were everyday items that evolved into symbolic grave goods. Others suggest they served a dual purpose, part ergonomic, part magical, part mosquito deterrent. Because yes, keeping your face off the mat could reduce your chances of waking up with a mouthful of sandflies. Now, you may wonder why nobody invented the good old soft pillow. They had the raw materials, linen, straw, even goose down. But in a culture obsessed with order, symmetry, and the eternal soul, perhaps lumpy softness didn't cut it. A stone headrest was stable, predictable. It didn't squish, it didn't surprise you with weird feather lumps. It just was. That said, there's evidence that the rich may have tucked a bit of fabric over the top. Think of it like the original pillowcase only. Instead of Egyptian cotton, it was Egyptian cotton, just with far fewer thread counts and a much higher chance of lice. You walk barefoot across cool mud brick floors, and outside jackals cry in the distance. The stars glint above the palm fronds. Somewhere nearby, a priest is preparing for a night ritual, and a servant tucks a rolled-up mat under their arm. Sleep here isn't just something you do, it's an intersection of biology, ritual, and cosmic alignment. It matters how you sleep, where you sleep, and with what's supporting your spirit's exit ramp. And speaking of exit ramps, hieroglyphs show that dreams weren't casual here. Egyptians saw the dream state as a gateway to the divine. That made your pillow, or more accurately your headrest, a literal launch pad to the afterlife. NASA could never. By now you're adjusting your neck to this imaginary stone support and wondering how many chiropractic visits it would take to realign your spine after one night in Memphis, the old one, not Tennessee. But the discomfort may have been intentional. You weren't meant to sink into oblivion. Sleep was a state of watchfulness, not surrender. A time to receive messages from God's ancestors, or occasionally, that weird falcon who kept showing up in your dreams. Historians still argue whether dream interpretation was strictly religious or also an early psychological tool. Of course, if you were royal, your stone headrest might be shaped like a lotus bloom or carved with symbols meant to ward off evil spirits, which, by the way, was another reason to keep your head lifted. the belief that malevolent beings couldn't reach you if your face wasn't smushed against the earth. It's charming how superstition often aligned with basic hygiene. So you lie back, you feel the cool curve of stone press into the base of your skull, you try not to think about how the ancient Nile sometimes flooded graves or how a scorpion might crawl across your mat. Instead, you let your mind drift. You are an Egyptian scribe, your fingers ink-stained, your dreams sacred. You whisper a prayer to Thoth for clarity and sleep. And as the desert wind sighs outside, you begin to understand stone doesn't have to mean cold. In this place, in this mindset, it means permanence, stillness, a dream that lasts forever. You wake, or maybe you never truly fell asleep in the shadowy quiet of an early Egyptian dawn. The air is still heavy with incense from the night rituals, and dew clings to the tall stalks of papyrus just beyond the temple walls. A single ibis clacks its beak somewhere nearby, like it's gossiping about your questionable sleep posture. Your neck hurts, but your soul impeccably aligned. You roll off your mat and walk stiffly into the waking world where the next question begins to take shape. Who even came up with the idea of carving a rock into a neck perch? And when? We trace the origin of this bony bedtime accessory to the Old Kingdom around 2600 BCE, though it probably existed earlier. Tomb paintings from that era show headrests tucked beneath royal skulls like they were as essential as bread and beer. Some had holes for tying linen to keep the head from slipping, sort of an early seatbelt for your brain. But here's the twist, Egypt wasn't the only place doing it. Ancient headrests pop up in sub-Saharan Africa, Mesopotamia, China, and even Japan. Scholars still argue whether these were parallel inventions or cultural hand-me-downs via trade and migration. It's like everyone in the ancient world simultaneously agreed, let's make sleep less comfortable. You step through the temple courtyard, dodging a sleepy goat nibbling on date leaves, and enter the sleeping quarters of a noble household. The headrest here is ivory curved, just a bit more gently carved with lions. It's a luxury piece, the sort you'd find buried next to someone important. Probably someone whose jaw was clenched 24/7. What's interesting is that these weren't just ergonomic curiosities, they had names. Egyptians called them wares, which means something like support or stand. But they also appeared in funerary texts where they're spoken of as lifts of the head, meant to help the soul rise and begin its journey. Imagine being so committed to symbolic efficiency that even your pillow had to multitask. Here's a fringe tidbit. Some Egyptologists think the shape of the headrest, two upright supports with a curved top, was designed to resemble the rising sun between twin mountains, a powerful image of resurrection. Your stiff neck. A small price to pay for metaphysical rebirth. And just to make things more theatrical, priests would sometimes anoint the headrest with oils or recite protective spells before placing it under a body. You didn't just sleep, you prepared for it like a flight attendant reviewing exit row procedures. You wander into a humble weaver's home, now further from the Nile, where the headrest is simpler, just local limestone smoothed from years of use. No lions, no lotus blossoms. But it's still placed with care at the head of a palm fiber sleeping mat. Nearby, a bit of linen rests folded, likely to be draped over the top. Even among the working class, there's dignity in the way the head is elevated, kept off the ground like a small act of defiance against the dust and heat. But let's not romanticize it too much. You still had to deal with bugs sweating through the night and the occasional runaway donkey. Sleep was a privilege, not a guarantee. The stone pillow didn't exactly whisper sweet dreams. It mumbled, "Don't die before sunrise." And yet the consistency of headrest use suggests it worked, or at least felt right culturally. We do similar things today, like setting alarms we hate or squeezing into window seats on planes just for the wall lean. It's less about comfort and more about what makes us feel settled. Oh, and here's a curious aside. There's archaeological evidence that some headrests were built with tiny secret compartments, possibly to store amulets or dream charms. It's like having a bedside drawer, but one that sits directly under your skull. The ancient equivalent of sleeping with your AirPods under your pillow. You continue through the house, noting how even the children's mats have miniaturized headrests. Maybe they were trained from an early age, like baby monks mastering the art of self-denial. Or maybe the kids use theirs as toys during the day. Archaeologists have debated that too. Some headrests bear playful carvings or animal shapes which might have helped little ones feel more protected at night. You duck outside as the sun peeks over the horizon, a hazy gold bleeding into the blue. The Nile glimmers like it knows something you don't. And in that moment, the whole obsession with head elevation starts to make sense. When your entire cosmology is built around cycles of life and rebirth, lifting your head even just a few inches off the ground is like participating in that sacred rhythm. It says, I'm still part of the story. Even in sleep, the Egyptians insisted on rising. And as you walk along the reed-choked riverbank, it hits you what we lie on, what we rest against. Says as much about our beliefs as it does our spines. The ancient Egyptian pillow wasn't soft, wasn't cuddly, but it held your dreams high enough for the gods to find them. The heat picks up quickly as you make your way toward the craftsman's quarter. Dust rises under your sandals, and the air smells like sawdust, goat sweat, and something vaguely fruity like dates left too long in the sun. Somewhere ahead, a man hums a work chant, chiseling rhythmically, as though each knock on the stone has to apologize for waking it. You arrive at a small sun-baked workshop, half open to the air, where the earliest pillow engineers, if we can call them that, are deep in the grind. Literally. One carves sandstone. Another polishes alabaster with desert sand and goat hair. These are your headrest makers, the IKEA of eternity. It's not glamorous work, but it's essential. Because if someone dies without a headrest, well, let's just say nobody wants to risk their soul getting stuck with its chin on the floor for eternity. So there's always demand, especially among the elite. You lean in to observe the carver's hands. He's not just shaping a chunk of stone. He's etching in symbols, ankhs, scarabs, falcons, each one supposedly adding layers of magical protection. This wasn't just decor. It was functional spellcraft, a kind of spiritual warranty. Historians still argue whether headrests were considered status symbols or strictly ritual items. The truth is probably both. Your neighbor might use a chipped sandstone block while the high priest got ebony inlaid with electrum. And naturally, the pharaoh's version looked like it could file your taxes and recite poetry in 3 dialects of Middle Egyptian. Let's pause on materials for a moment. While most surviving headrests are stone, wealthier sleepers opted for carved wood, sycamore, tamarisk, cedar, imported from Lebanon. Wood was rare and expensive, so using it for a pillow was essentially saying, my dreams are sponsored. But here's a fringe tidbit for your sleep brain. Some archaeologists believe these wooden headrests might have been soaked in resin or scented oils to create a kind of aromatherapy pillow. Imagine nodding off with your neck cradled by sandalwood frankincense or that elusive ingredient we still don't know how to pronounce properly, kai-fi. Not a bad way to drift into the duat. You move to the back of the shop where a younger apprentice is attempting a headrest shaped like a lotus bloom. It's charmingly uneven. The kid glances up at you like he knows it won't pass inspection. You smile because you've been there, maybe not carving symbolic pillows for ghosts, but failing upward in front of mentors universally relatable. You sit for a moment on an overturned basket and watch them work. Each piece begins as a block rough squat, unremarkable. But slowly, through careful chiseling and polishing, it becomes something more than utilitarian. It becomes part of a belief system. And that's what makes it fascinating. In a world that didn't even have mattresses as we know them, Egyptians designed an object that lifted not just the head, but the idea of sleep. They believed dreams mattered, that the body even at rest needed spiritual alignment, that posture could be metaphysical. You glance at a half-finished headrest and catch sight of a faint incised hieroglyph The eye of Horus watching sleep like a very judgmental bedtime nanny. There's care in that detail. Attention. A message whispered across centuries: sleep well or else. The craftsman beside you mentions that during the reign of Akhenaten, yes, the monotheistic pharaoh with a flair for architectural drama, headrest styles changed slightly. They became more streamlined, sometimes omitting the usual gods and symbols. Historians still argue whether this was a design choice or a theological statement. You wonder if someone somewhere whispered, "Is it just me, or are these getting too minimalist?" You walk past a pile of rejected pieces, cracked stone, botched carvings, misaligned curves. Even in ancient times, there was a graveyard for failed ideas. You imagine one of these headrests getting buried anyway, tucked under some teenager who refused to worship Ra and insisted the best sleep position was face down. Nearby, an elderly worker nods off in the shade of a fig tree, his neck balanced awkwardly on a smooth log. It's not a headrest, but it gets the job done. And that's the kicker. Despite the effort poured into ceremonial sleep gear, most people probably used whatever they had. You step out of the workshop and back onto the dusty path, your ears still echoing with the scraping of tools, the muttered prayers, the hiss of oil poured over fresh carvings. The Nile glitters somewhere beyond the rooftops, reminding you that everything here flows stone into art sleep, into ritual silence, into history. And as you walk, you realize the headrest isn't just a pillow, it's a thesis statement, a miniature temple, a declaration that even in the stillness of sleep, the body deserves reverence and the dreams deserve a pedestal. The scent of resin still clings to your robes as you drift away from the headrest workshop and wander toward the temple quarter where the sleep death and the divine play an intricate little game of musical chairs. You pass a row of date palms swaying like sleepy sentinels and duck beneath a linen awning fluttering with embroidered eyes of Horus. Those things are everywhere, like the ancient world's version of a security camera. You're here to visit the scribes? Yes, the ink-stained introverts of the ancient Egyptian world. If you thought pillow making was intense, wait until you meet the men who wrote dreams into law. You hear the gentle scratching of reeds on papyrus long before you see them tucked into shaded alcoves, hunched over scrolls with the posture of men who've spent most of their adult lives regretting their career choice. One greets you with a distracted nod, gesturing for you to sit on a woven mat. Before him is a scroll detailing the ritual of the sleeping hours, a bedtime guidebook for priests and dreamers. You squint at the tiny pictograms. There's a line about washing your feet before bed to keep away snake spirits, and another about whispering a hymn to Hathor, goddess of sleep and sweet dreams. Historians still argue whether these bedtime rituals were reserved for the elite or filtered down to regular folk. What we do know is that temples often offered sleeping chambers where hopeful visitors came to experience incubation dreams, essentially waiting rooms for divine therapy. You lie down, fall asleep on a stone headrest, and hope a god shows up in your dreams to cure your gout or heartbreak or whatever 3,000-year-old spiritual crisis you're dealing with. This wasn't a side hobby. Dream interpretation was a serious business. Scribes kept extensive dream manuals. You know, in case someone dreamed of drinking crocodile milk or climbing an invisible staircase, both of which meant something very specific. Possibly, your neighbor is planning something shady, or don't trust geese this week. You point to a particularly elaborate section of symbols, shaped like bird stars and sleepwalking stick figures. The scribe leans over and explains that those dreams were logged under moon-favored visions. According to some texts, dreams that occurred during a full moon had more weight, especially if they featured white animals rising rivers, or your dead uncle giving you gardening advice. Here's a quirky fringe tidbit for your trivia-loving brain. Some priests reportedly drank Blue Lotus wine before sleep to encourage more vivid dreams. Yes, you heard that right. Blue Lotus wine. Mildly narcotic, faintly floral, likely the ancient world's version of NyQuil and a bubble bath. You ask the scribe whether these dreams were ever, embarrassing. He smirks, then flips open a side scroll with what appears to be a dream in which a man sees himself as a giant catfish reciting love poems to a statue. According to the margin notes, that meant you will receive a gift but at great emotional cost. You don't press further. There's a dream diary here from a priest named Hikareb who claimed to have seen Anubis ironing soles with a sunbeam. Historians still argue whether that passage is poetic metaphor or the result of blue lotus wine paired with questionable honey cakes. You nod solemnly. We've all been there. Behind the scribe, a large faded mural shows a sleeping figure atop a raised platform surrounded by incense burners and 4 priests waving fans. The figure's neck rests on a pristine alabaster headrest, eyes gently closed face, angled toward a glowing crescent moon. This was the temple ideal, peaceful, silent, blessed by sleep gods, who operated like nocturnal therapists. You can't help but wonder, was this really restful? I mean, sure, you're horizontal, but you're also half hoping a falcon-headed deity shows up to scream metaphors at you while the incense gives you a mild nosebleed. The scribe smiles faintly and says something about dreams being the tongue of the soul. He hands you a slip of papyrus with the symbol for rest without regret. It's shaped like a sleeping ibis. You don't know what to do with it, but it feels like a nice souvenir. As you leave the temple quarter, a young girl skips past carrying a bundle of crushed herbs, likely lavender myrrh, or that mystery plant the Egyptians used as both medicine and deodorant. You inhale and feel your eyelids twitch with drowsy delight. It's here you realize something odd. In ancient Egypt, sleep wasn't private. Not really. It was communal, divine, scheduled, sacred. It was a chance to be visited, to be healed, to be heard by powers beyond the waking world. And whether your neck rested on cold stone or aromatic wood, it was understood, sleep had rules. Sleep had rituals. Sleep had weight. You pass under a lintel carved with dream glyphs and step into the shadowed streets once more. The Nile murmurs beyond the stone walls, and you can almost imagine the dreams floating downstream, papyrus scrolls, fish-shaped spirits and all. You follow the scent of cedar and old linen through the winding streets until it delivers you rather dreamily to one of the lesser-known corners of ancient Egyptian life bedchambers. Not of royalty or priests, but of scribes, weavers, and everyday sleep seekers who weren't dreaming under temple roofs or embalming tents. You duck through a doorway so low you're briefly concerned about hitting your third eye on the lintel. Inside, the air is cooler, heavy, with the earthy comfort of packed mud walls and faded reed mats. This is what sleep looks like for the working class in 1300 BCE. A simple room, a jar of cool water near the doorway, maybe a cat snoring in the corner like it owns the place, which it probably does. And against the far wall, what you've been waiting for, the stone pillow. Technically, it's a headrest, a curved block made of limestone, wood, or ivory, set on a short pedestal. It's not the plush, overstuffed sleep cloud your neck might be used to, but this was the ergonomic solution of its time. Archaeologists still debate how widespread these stone headrests were outside the elite class. Some claim only wealthier citizens used them, while others argue even modest households kept one or two around, possibly passed down like family heirlooms or reluctantly shared with guests who snored like donkeys. You lower yourself onto a woven mat, turn your head sideways, and place the base of your skull on the smooth arc of the stone. It's surprisingly not terrible, firm sure, but your neck isn't screaming yet. You're now aligned like an ancient sleeper, chin slightly tilted upward, back straight, and dreams politely invited through the proper posture. And no, they didn't forget padding. Some Egyptians tied cloth or leather around the headrest curve for comfort. Others stuffed linen inside wooden versions, turning them into the closest thing to a DIY pillowcase. It's possible, though, that many just embrace the chill of the limestone as a nighttime welcome mat for the soul. Historians still argue whether this head positioning had spiritual meaning or was purely anatomical. Some believe elevating the head was a defense against bad dreams, keeping one's mind just slightly above the realm of earthly disturbance. Others point out that lifting the head simply made it easier to breathe in Egypt's stifling desert heat. Either way, if you wake up cranky with a neckache in ancient Thebes, it's your own fault for not sleeping like a sphinx. You scan the room again, noticing something charming on the far wall. A tiny mural, perhaps painted by a bored child or a sentimental adult, showing a row of sleeping people stacked like fish on woven mats, all using differently shaped headrests, one even shaped like a lion's paw. A fringe theory once proposed that unique headrest carvings were matched to personality traits: crocodile base for stubborn sleepers, lotus for dreamers, snake for those prone to gossip. No, there's no hard evidence. But admit it, you'd sleep better on a snake if it meant you'd wake up knowing palace rumors. You lean back and notice another practical touch: vents carved high into the mud brick walls designed to circulate the breeze. No glass windows here, just open slits for air, and the occasional bat to swing by if you're unlucky. And in the corner, a bowl of dried natron sits next to a reed fan. It's not just for the living. Many Egyptians believed sleeping spaces should mimic tombs, quiet, organized, and scented. Even sleep was a rehearsal for death after all, just with more tossing. There's a short lull as your eyes trace the flicker of torchlight. A clay amulet dangles above the doorway. An eye of Horus again. They really loved this symbol. Supposedly it protected sleepers from night terrors, thieves or gods with no sense of personal boundaries. You imagine explaining to a celestial being that you're on your 8 hours and to please come back after breakfast. And here's a delightful mainstream historical fact. Ancient Egyptians often slept on their sides facing the wall. It was believed to shield your soul from wandering too far during dreams. You were also less likely to accidentally snore in the direction of an ancestor's spirit, which would be awkward. A child shuffles in behind you and curls up beside a worn pottery cat, pulling a thin linen sheet over his legs. The stone pillow is just his size, carved from alabaster and smooth from generations of dreaming. He adjusts, yawns, and falls asleep instantly. You resist the urge to ask if he saw Anubis yet. Give him time. As your head rests gently on your borrowed relic of a pillowcase, a slow understanding settles over you. Stone wasn't a punishment. It was permanence. In a land where tombs outlasted dynasties and names echoed louder than deeds, even sleep had to leave a trace. You run your fingers along the edge of the headrest, imagining all the sleepers before you. Not kings, not scribes, just people, fishers, bakers, storytellers, resting their heads in hope that dreams would visit gently and the morning wouldn't come too harshly. Outside, the wind kicks up dust that slips between stones. You hear the distant trill of a desert bird that doesn't care if you're trying to sleep historically. And you smile, pressing your cheek into limestone that has outlived empires. You've now officially napped like a pharaoh's accountant. The morning comes slowly, dragging the sun like a sleepy cat across the cracked horizon. You stretch, roll your shoulder, and feel the mild regret of sleeping on a stone headrest, like you're the star of a very niche orthopedic documentary. Still, you've earned a kind of strange bragging right, and as you step back into the amber light of the Nile morning, your feet coated in reed pollen, you find yourself wondering, what else did these people get weirdly right? Now, let's talk about linen, the fabric of the gods, and more importantly, the very first thing touching your ancient Egyptian skin in almost every context, sleep or otherwise. Your tunic linen, your pillow wrap linen. That ceremonial bandage your neighbor's cousin used to swaddle his pet ibis. Also linen. It all starts with a flax plant growing stubborn and lanky along the muddy floodplains of the Nile. The Egyptians were linen snobs. They didn't just want cloth, they wanted sheer white fabric so fine you could practically see your next life through it. And not just for show. Linen's breathable, cool, and magically resistant to desert sweat, which is frankly a miracle in a world where deodorant was just myrrh. You follow the steps of a weaver named Tepi, who greets you with the kind of tired smile that only someone who's been untangling threads since dawn can give. She leads you into her workshop, a cool, shaded courtyard, strung with drying bundles of flax, like nature's own chaotic yarn festival. Here you witness the entire linen-making process, soaking, beating, spinning, and weaving, all done by hand, usually with a child or three helping, and occasionally getting tangled in the thread themselves. Tepi gestures proudly to a pile of folded cloth beside her loom. This is premium stuff. And yes, some of it will eventually become pillowcases. Though that's a bit of a misnomer. Most pillowcases were just wrapped layers of cloth tied around headrests or padded blocks swapped out, depending on the sleep or the occasion, or the number of lice they had that week. Historians still argue whether these linen wraps were merely hygienic or held symbolic meaning. Some temples recorded sleep rituals where sacred dreams required clean linen for proper divine reception, essentially spiritual bandwidth. Others believe it was just about keeping your precious stone headrest from smelling like garlic and fish, which also sacred in its own way. The process of turning flax into linen is no joke. The Egyptians didn't have spinning wheels or textile factories. They had patience foot-powered looms and calluses. Lots of calluses. The result, though, was a fabric so cherished that even the dead wore it into eternity. Mummies weren't just wrapped in any linen, they were swaddled in layers upon layers of cloth, often bleached, pressed, and perfumed. Kind of like a prehistoric sleep sack with delusions of grandeur. You pause as a boy walks past, balancing a bundle of finished cloth on his head. He's humming something, probably the ancient Egyptian version of a work song, passed down through generations of linen laborers. You hum along, not knowing the words, but pretending the tune sounds vaguely familiar. Maybe it's in your bones. Nearby, a scribal apprentice quietly catalogs cloth deliveries on a limestone tablet. He scratches notes with a reed stylus dipped in soot ink, listing not just how many pieces were made, but who wove them, what they'll be used for, and which god might be offended if someone uses linen meant for Osiris in a foot wrap. Bookkeeping was serious business. Even pillow linens might have temple records. Oh, and here's your fringe tidbit. Wealthy Egyptians occasionally had linen embroidered with protective spells. These might be stitched so small and subtle that they looked like decorative patterns, but they were meant to ward off evil spirits, mosquito swarms, and nightmare pharaohs with petty grudges. Some households even used dyed linen muted ochres, faded indigos, though color was reserved for the wealthy and slightly extra. You watch Tepi show a young apprentice how to fold linen for storage, flat, crisp, with corners sharp enough to slice a date. The apprentice tries, fails, gets a playful smack on the arm, and starts over. This is how sleep comfort was trained, not just sewn. Learned through muscle memory and maternal side-eye. Your own arms ache from imagining hours at the loom. You take a seat under a fig tree and touch the sample linen you were handed. Its cool whisper light and smells faintly of crushed reeds and goat soap. For something made by hand over weeks, it feels effortless, luxurious even. You drape it over your shoulder, pretending to be Cleopatra's laundry consultant. And while you're lounging, let's drop a mainstream historical fact. Ancient Egyptian linen was so fine and valued that it often doubled as currency. Workers might be paid in bolts of it. Some taxes were owed in linen, not coins. Which means if you slept on a fresh linen-wrapped headrest, you were essentially dreaming on a pile of money. Try not to wrinkle it. As the sun climbs higher, casting that dusty gold glow over everything, you realize linen wasn't just about sleep or fashion or function. It was a ritual, a message, a lifestyle if linen had a TikTok account. From bed linens to burial shrouds, the Egyptians wrapped themselves in comfort and meaning. And now so do you. You wrap the fabric loosely around your shoulders the way someone might a scarf in autumn. There's no wind, no hurry. Just the rustle of papyrus and the distant splash of someone rinsing dye from their hands. You lean back, linen against your cheek, and close your eyes. You drift a while, wrapped in the soft hush of linen and fig tree shade, but eventually your curiosity wiggles back into motion like a mosquito that refuses to honor nap time. So you rise, shake out your knees, and begin the next leg of your meander into the bedchambers of the ancient wealthy. You expect luxury, maybe even glamour. Instead, you find something stranger and weirder than anything in a modern five-star hotel. Because when it came to beds, the Egyptians had range. From humble mat-on-floor setups to lacquered wooden frames shaped like lions with back problems, their sleep architecture was unique. You step into the private quarters of a mid-level official. The room is small, dark, and smells faintly of acacia and roasted barley. The bed here is a raised wooden frame with legs shaped like animal paws, lion, gazelle, or in one particularly ambitious household, you passed crocodile. It's strung with woven leather straps that creak under pressure and would definitely snap under the weight of a modern brunch. There's no mattress, no downy fluff, just a palm mat. You poke it. It pokes back. Comfort clearly was a later invention. Still, to soften the experience, many beds were layered with folded linens and topped, of course, with the prized headrest. Often carved from wood, sometimes inlaid with ivory or shell, and occasionally featuring inscriptions to ward off nightmares or nosy gods. Some headrests even had detachable bases, a sort of travel pillow prototype that tragically never caught on with airplane passengers. A servant enters carrying a pot of scented oil. You observe her routine dabbing oil on linen strips, tucking them beneath the sleeper's neck and whispering a short prayer to Bes, the dwarf god of sleep music and general good vibes. Scholars still debate whether Bes was worshipped primarily as a protector of dreams or simply a cosmic bouncer, keeping bad spirits from your REM cycle. You take note of the oil's aroma, myrrh, a bit of cinnamon, and a pungent undertone historians describe as mysteriously fish-adjacent. The ancient Egyptians were big on aromatic sleep aids. They stuffed linen sachets with herbs burned resin before bed, and even wore amulets shaped like sleeping cobras because nothing says sweet dreams like reptilian neckwear. The quirky fact of this room: it contains a second smaller bed beside the first, clearly not for a spouse. This one, as the scribes will tell you, is for the Ka, the sleeper's soul double. Egyptians believed that during sleep your soul roamed about shopping for cosmic wisdom, or just people watching in the afterlife. And if your Ka needed to return early, best not to let it find your bed already full. Hence, guest bed for ghosts. You pause to appreciate the logic. You also admire the weirdly beautiful fact that sleep wasn't just about rest, it was an act of spiritual logistics, a divine commute. And Egyptians as ever planned their travel accommodations thoroughly. Outside the window, the sun climbs past its lazy apex. You move through chambers of increasingly higher rank wealthy merchants, priests, nobles, all with variations on the same theme. Raised beds, harsh supports, ritual oils, and embroidered linens so fancy you'd be scared to drool on them. One priest's headrest is carved into a miniature winged Ra, complete with outstretched sunbeams. Another has a secret drawer underneath for tucking in protective spells, or if you believe the fringe, historians' snacks for the soul's nightly journey. Historians still argue whether these sleep setups were standard practice or reserved for the upper class. Excavations of middle-class homes suggest a spectrum. Some slept on palm mats rolled against mud brick walls, others on actual bed frames with minimal cushioning. The only constant: everyone had their version of the sacred head support. Stone, wood, ivory, Egyptians didn't mess around when it came to spinal alignment in the underworld. You enter the one final chamber. This one is vast, echoing, and smells like cedar and gold leaf. It's the bedchamber of a vizier. The man who once slept here controlled half the kingdom's grain. His bed frame is made of polished sycamore inlaid with lapis lazuli. His headrest gold-plated. No joke. The kind of thing you'd expect to see in a jewelry case, not under your sweaty skull. And yet, despite the finery, it still looks uncomfortable. Regal, but stiff. Important, but somehow itchy. Maybe that's the point. In a world where even kings feared the judgment of the gods, maybe sleep wasn't about luxury. Maybe it was just about preparation. Lying still enough to dream. Or be judged. Or both. You step back, brushing a hand along the carved edge of the bed. It's cold. Still, like it's waiting for someone. You don't climb in, but for a second you picture the kind of dreams this bed might have held. Visions of harvests, of battles, of sacred bulls and nervous scribes, and a stomachache caused by too much roasted goose. And then you move on quietly. Outside, the light is shifted. It's the color of warm honey and toasted linen filtered through papyrus screens. You pass back into the air of the hallway, where another servant lights a shallow bowl of oil and fans the smoke toward a nearby room. You inhale, you exhale, you feel the hush again. The light has mellowed into that rich, syrupy gold that only Egypt seems to master, half sun, half dust, fully hypnotic. You find yourself drifting again, but this time toward the quarters of the scribes. Not the high priests or pharaohs now, but the literate backbone of the kingdom. The thinkers, the chroniclers, the sleep-deprived nerds who somehow managed to make insomnia sacred. You pass under a stone lintel carved with hieroglyphs that whisper stories about cattle counts, tax grain, and something about how many cats are too many cats. Inside, the air is cooler, thicker with ink and lamp soot, the quiet hum of someone still copying down yesterday's sun cycle. The scribe's sleeping space is Spartan. A rolled mat, a small wooden chest that doubles as a pillow if you're brave, and a headrest carved with the face of Thoth, the ibis-headed god of knowledge, because nothing says relax like being watched by a judgmental bird god as you drool in your sleep. Still, there's a strange peace here. No lavish furniture, no scented linens, just a neat stack of scrolls, a few reed pens, and a jug of watered beer. The beer, by the way, was not just a scribe's treat. It was the sleep aid of the people. Fermented barley water, cloudy with chunks, and believed to calm the nerves, if not the stomach. Historians still argue whether its effects were genuinely medicinal or just a case of, if you drink enough of it, everything feels like a lullaby. A thin cat rubs against your leg, probably named something like Whisker of Bast or Destroyer of Papyrus Rolls. The scribes loved cats, and cats returned the favor by treating papyrus beds like their personal thrones. You spot claw marks along a scroll chest and make a mental note ancient feline insomnia must have been a nightmare. Here, dreams weren't just escapes, they were part of the job. Scribes were expected to interpret omens, transcribe celestial predictions, and on especially unlucky nights decode divine dreams dreamt by their higher-ups. Imagine being woken up because your supervisor had a weird vision about a crocodile and a turnip, and now you're the one who has to turn that into a state policy memo. You sit near the scroll pile. One of them details dream interpretations. Dreams of snakes meant power. Dreams of drowning. That meant someone stealing your bread. Dreams of headless animals. Probably just a normal Tuesday if you worked near the temple, but still not great. Fringe Egyptologists love to debate the dream manual of Ken Herkepchef, a real papyrus that contains one of the most complete dream dictionaries from the ancient world. Historians still argue whether it was actually used in daily life or merely part of a ritual toolkit. But what is known is this: people took their dreams seriously. Nighttime was a time of revelation of divine contact, and for the poor scribe, a second shift with no overtime. Even sleep posture mattered. You note the way scribes curled themselves along the wall, head propped on the hard chest or a shaped stone. A belief circulated that facing east while sleeping welcomed good spirits and clarity of mind. Facing west, a little too close to the land of the dead for comfort. So if you were a left-handed dreamer who liked the Western Wall, tough luck. It's around this point you start to appreciate just how intentional Egyptian sleep was. From the wealthiest tomb-bound official to the humblest ink-stained clerk, everyone had a nighttime routine guided by belief superstition, and apparently the assumption that comfort was deeply overrated. You pause by a candle, one of those thick, oil-fed types that sputter like they're gossiping with the shadows. The scribe's foot twitches in his sleep. He murmurs something, maybe an inventory list, maybe a prayer, or maybe he's just dreaming about running out of black ink during festival season. Poor guy. The cat curls at your feet, now satisfied. The scent of ink and dusty linen rises with the candle's warmth. You find yourself drowsing again, lulled, not by plush cushions, but by the sheer stubbornness of people determined to find rest, even if it meant lying on wood covered in oil next to a sacred beetle statue. A papyrus scroll rustles behind you. Windmouse. A ghostly editor dissatisfied with last night's prose, you decide not to investigate. Instead, you press onward into the deeper chambers. Deeper into the forgotten hallways where philosophy met fatigue and dreams were both therapy and prophecy. You pass murals showing people asleep beneath stars, gods whispering into human ears, and even one particularly bizarre image of a man dreaming about a goose juggling sun discs. You don't try to explain that one, because in ancient Egypt, dreams weren't meant to be explained. They were meant to be noticed, recorded, and maybe if you were lucky, answered. The corridor narrows, as if the walls themselves are exhaling centuries of secrets to your hair. You move slower now, not out of fear, but because the air has grown thicker with incense and myth. Up ahead, a flickering doorway glows with a buttery flickering light. It smells faintly of cedar and honey odd. You step into what looks like a chamber devoted entirely to sleep magic. Yes, sleep, as in literal ceremonial dozing. Welcome to the ritual sleep spaces designed not for rest but for revelation. This chamber belongs to a temple priest, one of those lucky few who got to nap in style and claim it was a holy duty. The Egyptians called it incubation. You'd lie on a sacred bed within a god's temple, usually one dedicated to Imhotep or Serapis, and wait for a divine dream to deliver a diagnosis, a solution, or occasionally some really abstract poetry. Historians still argue whether temple incubation was open to everyone or reserved for a priestly elite. What's clear is this dream sleep wasn't passive, it was a quest. Think of it like ancient Egypt's version of a vision board, except the board was a stone slab, and the visions included snakes that wore crowns and told you to eat more onions. The bed in the center of this room is carved from polished alabaster, cool and luminous like moonlight frozen in time. It looks wildly uncomfortable, no padding, just beauty, but there's a reverence to it. It's shaped like a lion curled mid-roar, with your head meant to rest between its paws. Because nothing screams restful sleep like a carnivorous cat's breath on your neck. You lie back anyway, because you're committed. Around you, murals spiral across the walls. There's a goddess with stars in her hair. Nut the sky herself arching protectively over a row of tiny snoring humans. There's Thoth again, scribbling dreams into a scroll as if he's judging your REM cycles. And of course there's a giant beetle wearing sunglasses. Okay, not sunglasses, but you want them to be sunglasses. A priest, or maybe a sleepy acolyte, begins softly chanting from behind a papyrus curtain. You don't speak ancient Egyptian, but the melody has that lullaby-paced long vowels, half-hummed consonants, a cadence that seems designed for eyelids and breathing. Here's the fun part. Some rituals required you to drink something before dream sleep. Oh, a tincture of blue lotus, perhaps an actual flower, sacred and psychoactive, which the Egyptians brewed into teas or wine. Modern scholars still argue whether it truly induced hallucinations or simply helped you fall asleep with prettier thoughts. Either way, it's the closest thing to an ancient NyQuil with bonus divine revelations. You imagine sipping the tea slightly bitter with a floral aftertaste and a hint of oops, that was the priest's private stash. A shiver moves down your spine. not from fear, from the odd feeling that you're doing something important by lying down. And you are. Because these dreams weren't just about yourself. They were messages for the sick, the grieving, the troubled. People traveled days to sleep inside these walls, hoping their dreams would bring clarity or comfort. The temple was a kind of hospital one with no bandages, just rest incense and the occasional snake carving for ambiance. The fringe theory you might like some Egyptologists suggest the priests staged dreams. They'd whisper into people's ears while they slept, planting divine messages like celestial soundtracks. Imagine thinking the god Amun told you to donate 2 goats only to find out later it was just Brother Keti with a really convincing whisper voice. Of course, others believe the dreams were genuine, pure moments of spiritual insight. Still, others argue that it doesn't matter whether the dreams were real or manipulated. What mattered was that people believed them. You close your eyes now, mirroring the figures in the murals. The lions at your back do not move. The incense smoke curls in loops above your face like hieroglyphs learning to dance. The ground hums, not like a machine, but like memory. As if the stone remembers every breath ever released on it. That's the kind of drama ancient Egypt would absolutely have written into their tourism brochures. Suddenly, a draft grazes your forehead, and then, just for a second, you think you hear something. A voice. No, not a voice. A low chuckle. A god laughing at your dream about giant onions dancing across the Nile in feathered hats. You blink. No gods, no feathers. Just flickering torchlight and your own reflection caught in a bronze mirror mounted to the wall, one so polished it shows your sleep lines in exaggerated glory. Bronze mirrors were prized among Egyptian elites, polished daily and often buried with the dead. Because naturally, if you're going to journey into the afterlife, you might as well look well rested. You rise from the lion bed. Slowly, deliberately, the chamber seems satisfied with your visit. And outside its threshold, the real world has shifted again, somehow quieter. As if you've just walked out of a theater halfway through the credits. It's darker now. Fewer voices, just the hush of sand outside, and the steady rhythm of temple guards pretending not to fall asleep at their posts. You move toward the next wing, toward the women's quarters, where a different kind of sleep story awaits. But you pause first. One last glance at the lion bed, the goddess, sealing the incense fog that refuses to disperse. And then you whisper back to the god you think you heard. Good dream. You step carefully into the next corridor, your sandals making soft, muted taps on polished limestone. The air is cooler here, scented faintly with crushed acacia pods and oil from date seeds. Subtle hints of a different rhythm, a different room. You're entering the women's quarters of the estate now, and with them a peculiar chapter of pillow history you didn't expect. Here sleep takes on the flavor of intimacy. Not romantic intimacy necessarily, though that too has its place, but the closeness of shared silence of sisters and servants, of whispered stories before sleep, and the quiet choreography of hair braiding by moonlight. Your eyes adjust to dim light filtered through carved wooden mashrabiyah screens. Their geometric shadows flickering across the floor like the wings of moths. In the center of the chamber, you spot them, a circle of headrests, much like the ones you've already seen, stone, crescent-shaped, simple. But these are smaller, children's headrests. Yes. Even kids were expected to rest their delicate necks on these elegantly rigid accessories. Not a plushie in sight. Instead, each pillow has been lovingly engraved with protective spells, ankhs, and tiny images of Bes, the dwarf god of music, humor, childbirth, and, well, nightmare prevention. Bes, who sticks out his tongue and shakes a tambourine to scare away bad dreams. Honestly, we all need a Bes. You kneel beside one and run a finger along its edge. Smooth from use, worn by the sleep of someone very small, very long ago, possibly the daughter of a priestess, or a servant girl, or even a young apprentice dancer being trained in temple performances. Historians still argue whether these sleeping arrangements varied by class or were standard across households. There's evidence to support both in wealthier homes. Children may have had elaborately painted headrests, while in humbler quarters they used basic stone or ceramic. But one thing is consistent: the belief that sleep was not just downtime, it was a liminal state, a place where God's ancestors and even illnesses could sneak in. Hence the spells. You find one now painted in faded ochre on the base of a headrest. A hymn to Isis tucked in between lotus flowers and stylized birds. It translates roughly, "Let no serpent coil near the sleeper. Let dreams be soft and breath unbroken." You nod quietly impressed. Protective design and product marketing circa 1200 BCE. Nearby, another corner of the room draws your attention. Here, a more adult arrangement: two side-by-side sleeping platforms, woven mats stacked over low frames, each with its own stone headrest. Between them, a low oil lamp flickers beside a dish of dried myrrh and something that looks suspiciously like eyeliner. Yes, ancient Egyptian women wore kohl even to bed. Not purely for vanity, though their definition of no makeup look was very different from ours, but for protection. The lead-based cosmetic helped prevent eye infections, and they believed it warded off the evil eye. Sleep again wasn't just rest, it was strategy. You find a small box tucked into a wall niche. Inside, amulets. Some shaped like cats, others like open eyes or frogs. A few contain hair. Yes, hair. Human hair was often braided with protective threads and kept near the head during sleep to safeguard against illness. Or nosy siblings. Probably both. A gentle breeze stirs the mashrabiyah again. The shadows shift. And then faintly, you hear humming. It's not ghostly, it's just a reenactor. Or your imagination. Or maybe someone down the hallway still believes in lullabies whispered across centuries. The tune is repetitive and low, the kind of melody that doesn't demand attention. It just exists like a heartbeat. You lean against the wall and listen, imagining a grandmother gently swaying beside a granddaughter, humming the same tune she heard as a child, both of them safe beneath the gaze of painted goddesses. Here's the fringe tidbit: some archaeologists have discovered dolls and tombs, beautifully carved figures, some with movable limbs and tiny wigs. The debate historians still argue whether these were toys or ritual objects. Did they soothe little ones to sleep, or were they guardians meant to keep the sleeping soul company? You'd like to think it's both, because as you glance around the women's quarters at the painted pots, the half-worn sandals, the cracked mirror, shards, you realize something oddly comforting. Despite the rigidity of those headrests, despite the stone and sand and ritual formality, there was tenderness here. Sleep was protected, revered, watched over. You imagine lying down now on one of the low mats, your cheek hovering just above the stone arc, lulled by the scent of crushed herbs and warm linen. Someone hums beside you. The room darkens. A cat slinks across the far end, tail twitching once before vanishing into shadow. And in that moment, just before your eyes close, you realize you've crossed a line in this journey. Not a dramatic one. There's no trapdoor or brass gong, just a soft understanding. The Egyptians didn't just invent the headrest. They invented the idea that sleep, true, safe, symbolic sleep, deserved architecture. And with that thought tucked gently behind your eyelids, you rise once more, leaving the quarters behind and heading toward the papyrus archives where ancient dreams were recorded in ink for those who dared to wake up and remember them. You shuffle softly into a long corridor lit by oil lamps flickering like patient stars. The air grows hushed. This is not a sleeping room, but something arguably more sacred in Egyptian archive. Not for taxes or military plans, mind you, but for dreams. Literal ones. Rows of narrow niches stretch out along the sandstone walls, each containing scrolls of papyrus rolled tightly and tied with linen cords. You trail a finger along the edge of one, marveling at how sleep itself was once considered a message medium. Egyptians believed dreams could be oracles, warnings, even diagnoses like If you dreamt of being bitten by a crocodile, it might mean you had a fever, or just unresolved issues with your aunt. Historians still argue whether all dreams were interpreted by priests or whether laypeople had basic dream guides at home like some ancient BuzzFeed quiz. What kind of goat in your dream means promotion? At the center of the room sits a stone table flat and cool, with half-unrolled scrolls laid out like sleepy confessions. One is written in beautifully looping hieratic script with a small drawing of a hippo beneath the header. It reads, loosely translated, "To dream of the river beast is to warn against uncontrolled appetite. Avoid wine. Avoid loud neighbors." Ancient Egyptian self-help, it seems, was both direct and wildly specific. You sit for a moment on a low stone bench surrounded by thousands of years of people, quietly trying to make sense of what their sleeping minds delivered them. The pillows of stone, you realize, weren't just ergonomic relics. They were dream portals. If the body was stilled properly, chin lifted, spine straight, perhaps the soul had better reception. Somewhere behind you, wind sighs through a crack in the wall. You imagine a priest clad in white linen carefully choosing his own headrest before sleep, hoping the angle of his neck might influence divine clarity. Is that a stretch? Maybe. But even today, you adjust your pillow before a big decision. There's even a record of a professional dream interpreter from the reign of Ramses II. His job title, Scribe of the House of Life. It sounds more dramatic than it was. Mostly he just read dreams and assigned meaning like a hybrid between a sleep therapist and a very overqualified barista. He'd hear your vision raise an eyebrow and say something like, "Ah, yes, a lotus floating downstream while on fire." Classic marriage proposal omen. The room also contains dream dictionaries. Yes, those existed. A lion, Eel's victory. Hair falling out, Iki was misfortune. A crocodile hugging you, debatable. That's your fringe tidbit for the night. Scholars recently uncovered a temple fragment where a dream interpreter wrote sarcastic marginalia next to a particularly strange vision, something about being chased by ducks in sandals. The note reads, "More beer before sleep." Apparently, even key ancient scribes had their limits. But it wasn't all silly. Some dreams were considered state secrets. Pharaohs had private sleep chambers where only temple priests could interpret what visions arose. These chambers were often built deep inside temple complexes shielded from noise heat, and one assumes nosy in-laws. The belief was that a king's dreams could affect the entire Nile Valley. One wrong omen, and harvests could be delayed, or wars begun. You find a small locked chest in one corner carved with the Eye of Horus and secured with a copper latch. It's empty now, but once it held sacred dream scrolls too potent to be read by just anyone. Scrolls that spoke of stars falling from the sky, of serpents eating cities, of a woman turning into a falcon and flying into the moon. The original bedtime horror stories, but wrapped in holy reverence. Back then, sleep wasn't an escape, it was an audition. If the gods liked your dreams, they might bless you with insight or healing. If not, well, you'd wake up confused and need to schedule another appointment with the interpreter. Tuesdays were probably packed. You lean back against the wall, letting the atmosphere settle over you like a silk sheet. This archive isn't dusty. It's quiet, yes, but lovingly maintained. The walls don't crumble, they breathe. 1,000 stories of sleep tucked into every crease. And then there it is, a carving on the bench where you sit, worn faint but still legible. It's the hieroglyph for rest, followed by a tiny headrest symbol and a line that reads, "May your dreams be guarded as gold in the tomb." You smile to yourself. The Egyptians didn't treat sleep as weakness or indulgence. They treated it like a conversation with the gods, one that required preparation, respect, and yes, even a slightly uncomfortable headrest. You rise again, stretching your spine like a reed uncurling in the Nile sun, and walk slowly toward the next room. Your steps are quieter now, deliberate. You understand finally that to sleep in ancient Egypt wasn't to pause your life. It was to enter the second part of it. You push through a hanging reed curtain into a room flooded with soft morning light filtered through sheer linen draped across high windows so pale and delicate, it looks like woven fog. This chamber, unlike the others, hums with preparation, not rituals, not offerings, not even sleep. This is the laundry room. Yes, even in temples and noble households, linen has had to be cleaned, sorted, mended, and crucially scented. Because you see, in ancient Egypt, sleep wasn't just a bodily function, it was an aesthetic. And the linens you lay on, the scents that filled the room, even the way your headrest was arranged, these were not mundane concerns. They were a daily art form. A servant in a striped tunic hums quietly as he lifts a headrest off a low table. It's wood this time, not stone, curved and polished, etched with lotus flowers. Still not a feather pillow, but we're inching closer. He dips a cloth into a shallow basin of natron solution and wipes it down slowly. Natron. Your historical fact for this section is the mineral compound the Egyptians used for everything from mummification to soap to toothpaste. And yes, apparently also pillow polish. Nearby baskets overflow with linens. Some are dyed a faint blue, some pinkish from pomegranate tannins, some still crisp white from the Nile's gentle bleaching. A few have delicate embroidery, a bird, a spiral, a papyrus stalk stitched in thread so fine it looks like it would dissolve in moonlight. You run your fingers over the seams and think, wait, did they really sleep on this stuff? Historians still argue whether common people got to use embroidered sheets or if that was strictly elite territory. What they do agree on is this scent mattered. Egyptians scented their linens with oils, especially kaifi, a blend so complex modern perfumers still struggle to recreate it. Cinnamon myrrh, honey mint wine raisins, basically the spice aisle mated with a cocktail bar. One scroll found near a noblewoman's tomb even includes an entire pre-bedtime scenting ritual fan. The linen sprinkle crushed rose petals press with warm stone whisper thanks to Hathor. Is it necessary? Debatable? Is it extra? Oh, absolutely. And somehow still kinda charming. You kneel beside a low rack where headrests sit upside down drying. One is carved in the shape of a falcon wings arched where your neck would rest. Another is ivory with tiny silver inlays showing a river flowing through reeds. It looks like it costs more than your rent. But here it is in the laundry room being dried with equal care as the plain wooden ones. There's a fringe theory that some elite sleepers had pillow attendants. Yes, literally someone whose job it was to rotate and perfume your headrest every few days. Whether this is true or the fever dream of a bored Egyptologist, no one knows. But you can picture it, can't you? A young apprentice anxiously sniffing your pillow, like ugh, too much cedar, before scurrying off to rescent it with lotus oil instead. In one corner, there's a tiny stool beside a smaller pile of linens. Children's sleepwear, woven softer, lighter, embroidered with animals and tiny hands. You imagine a child being tucked in next to a carved hippo doll, the smell of warm milk and tamarisk wood still lingering in the air, and on the far wall, a mural, not of gods or war or boats. This one shows a woman reclining on a bed, her head tilted back on a half-moon-shaped pillow, a servant holding a jug of scented oil near her feet. The caption translated says, "Peace finds those who wait in stillness." Simple, honest, sleep as ceremony. You pause there a long while. This was the part of Egyptian sleep no one talks about: the prelude. Not the dream, not the divine message, not even the sacred angle of your head. But the act of preparing for it, honoring it, like winding down a string instrument before tucking it into its velvet case. And suddenly, you realize maybe we've regressed. You sleep on memory foam. You snore over Netflix credits. You drop face first into a bed crinkled with yesterday's emails. But here in a chamber no wider than your apartment kitchen, Someone once poured lavender oil into a palm-sized dish, fluffed a linen sheet with a fan made of ostrich feathers, and carefully aligned a headrest to catch the breeze from the courtyard. You take a long inhale. The faintest whisper of kai-fi oil still clings to the air, spicy, sweet, oddly grounding. It makes your brain slow down like someone turning the dimmer switch in your skull. There's something quietly radical about it all. Not just that the Egyptians carved pillows from limestone or perfumed their sheets with saffron, but that they treated sleep with reverence, as a thing to be earned, as a conversation with the sacred, as a nightly offering to yourself. And that maybe, just maybe, you deserve the same. You drift through a narrow hallway that smells faintly of beeswax and crushed reeds. There's a draft here carrying the hum of the outer courtyard and the faint plink of water trickling over limestone. And then just ahead you enter a chamber that feels different. This is not where anyone sleeps. This is where sleep is recorded. The Dream Archive. Not an official name, more of a whispered nickname among temple scribes and priests, who frankly have far too much papyrus on their hands. But here, tucked behind scrolls of tax ledgers and lunar calendars, you find row upon row of neatly tied bundles, soft leather cords, faded red seals, smudged titles like Year of the Hippo Flood Visitation and Drought or The Boat with Too Many Eyes. Yes, ancient Egyptian dream journals. See, dreams weren't treated as quirky subconscious noise like they are today. Back then, they were divine mail. Literal messages from God's ancestors, cosmic snakes. Sometimes all at once. You weren't expected to decode them on your own. That's what the temple dream interpreters were for. Imagine calling your local oracle to say, "I dreamed I had crocodile feet and married a fig tree." What does it mean? And they'd answer with a straight face, obviously a fertility omen, and maybe switch to barley. Historians still argue whether these interpreters truly believed in the symbolic power of dreams, or if they were just ancient Egypt's most elaborate therapists. Either way, they took it seriously. Some dreams were good, some were bad, some were night-side omens, a term used to describe anything that involved rivers running backward or birds speaking in human voices. You didn't ignore those, you wrote them down. Fast. You trail your fingers over a scroll shelf labeled Noblewoman Sobek Neferu's Dream Log 12th Dynasty. Inside, she describes floating through a garden of turquoise leaves chased by a golden cat with 5 tails. Interpretation unknown. But the entry ends with "I woke with a start." The stone pillow had shifted. Yes, her stone pillow woke her up. That detail alone is worth the papyrus it's written on. Is one mainstream fact here: the Egyptians compiled actual dream manuals. The most famous is the Chester Beatty Papyrus, which categorizes over 100 common dream themes and tells you whether they're good omens or portents of disaster. Dream of eating crocodile meat. Weirdly good. Dream of losing your teeth. Apparently also good. Dream of being dead. Mixed reviews. Dream of stepping on your pillow. That's just confusing. Near the corner sits a small desk and a delicate reed pen resting in a dish of ink. You imagine some poor scribe jolting awake at midnight to scribble. Dreamed of fire-colored ibis. Was definitely being judged. And you wonder, do dreams change depending on what you sleep on? Does a head of granite give you heavier dreams? Does sleeping low to the ground invite more serpents? Does a perfumed linen-wrapped pillow coax nicer visions? There's a fringe theory that temples rotated pillow materials seasonally cool alabaster in summer, warm polished wood in winter based not just on comfort but to invite specific dream archetypes. Warm materials souls dreams of ancestors. Cold ones etios dreams of gods. Whether this is true or just wishful academic poetry, who knows? But the logic feels oddly elegant. You thumb through a scroll filled with drawings. Not just writing illustrated dreams. A man floating through a field of open eyes. A boat with a staircase leading into the moon. A woman curled under a headrest carved like a scorpion. You stare, tilting your head. It's dream logic, sure. But it's also oddly peaceful. The way nightmares become beautiful when someone paints them in ochre and gold. Back then, some people slept in temples just to dream. It was called incubation. You'd arrive with an ailment, say a stiff neck, or a guilty conscience lay down beside a statue of a healing god like Imhotep or Serket, and hope the night delivered a vision. If it worked, you got your answer. If it didn't, you just tried again. Same pillow, same oils, more honeyed wine. In one case, a merchant dreamt that a giant cat scolded him for shortchanging his customers. The next morning, he donated a statue of Bastet to the temple, and according to a later entry, his migraines ceased immediately. Coincidence? Probably. But hey, the man had taste. And you lean over the table, brush dust from a page, and trace the symbols for sleep god and quiet heart, all drawn in one line. As if they belong together. You look back over your shoulder at the stone pillows, the feather fans, the jars of sacred perfume. And you wonder if sleep used to mean something deeper. Less about shutting down, more about opening up. A ritual that began before the dreams and echoed after them. You take one last glance at the scroll shelf. The dream archive is quiet. No wind, no footsteps, just the hush of linen brushing stone. And somewhere in the corner, the ghost of a cat with 5 tails might be watching. Purring, judging, waiting for you to fall asleep just so it can whisper something weird into your ear. You drift onward into the stillness of early dawn when even the ibis sleep and the Nile holds its breath. Beyond the dream, archive lies one final chamber round windowless and sunk partially into the ground. It feels cooler here somehow, heavier, not with dread but with memory. This is where the ancients kept their failed experiments, not dark curses or forbidden scrolls. No, those went to the high temples or were politely buried. This room is for sleep inventions that didn't quite catch on. The pillow tomb. Stone headrests with adjustable height, sort of like an early orthopedic gadget, except the sliding blocks tended to pinch hair. One especially ambitious design involved a neck brace that kept your head suspended in air using braided reeds and tension pegs. The scribbled caption reads, "Tested during flood season. Unstable." You can picture some poor novice rolling sideways and snapping the whole contraption like a harp string. But nestled in the far corner atop a plinth of worn sandstone rests the strangest object of all, a full-body sleeping harness. Yes, imagine strapping yourself into a vertical cocoon. Legs bound, arms tucked, head braced in a carved cradle. It's less nap and more pharaoh-shaped suitcase. And yet someone clearly thought this was the future of restful slumber. Scholars call it the sleeping mummy frame. You call it a hard pass. And here lies one of those truly fringe tidbits. There was once a brief movement among the more avant-garde priests to sleep standing up. Upright sleep was supposed to bring you closer to Mayat, the cosmic order. Like a sunflower standing at attention before the dawn. Or maybe just like someone very uncomfortable and full of regret. Mainstream historians agree that upright sleeping never took hold, thankfully. But the debate lingers, was it spiritual discipline or a social prank gone too far? You picture a line of novice monks pretending to enjoy their stiff postures while secretly longing for a basic stone headrest and a nap flat on the sand. You explore a side alcove where artisans once carved prototype pillows for royalty. Some are beautiful, smooth quartz curves, scalloped alabaster trays, and one delicate frame shaped like a pair of swans. Others, not so much. A scorpion-shaped headrest, a block with actual thorns embedded for dream purification. Someone even tried scented limestone infused with crushed lotus and cinnamon. Unfortunately, the oil caused mold and the pillow now smells like damp laundry. And yet none of these were discarded with shame. Here in this room, failure isn't failure, it's devotion. These were people who believed sleep was holy, that a better pillow could unlock deeper dreams, tighter cosmic alignment, or maybe just less neck pain. Historians still argue whether this room was ceremonial practical or something in between. Some suggest it doubled as a test chamber where elite sleepers trialed new slumber tech like early product testers for the gods. Others believe it was more of a reliquary for spiritual tools, a sort of spa meets lab meets shrine. Whatever the truth, you stand now amid centuries of sleepy ambition. You run your fingers across a trial piece made from polished hematite, supposedly used only on the night of the solstice when dreams could reveal political truths. No pressure, you mutter, and the stone remains cold. A nearby inscription carved into the floor reads, "To sleep is not to rest, to sleep is to cross." You think about that for a moment, not rest, but crossing. Where to? Maybe toward answers, maybe toward forgetting, or maybe just toward another room like this one filled with strange stone shapes and the sound of your own soft breathing. Even today, sleep researchers talk about memory consolidation and REM cycles. Ancient Egyptians didn't have that vocabulary, but they had incense, posture, silence, and intention. Maybe they understood something we've forgotten, that how you prepare to sleep shapes what comes next. You pause beside the vertical sleep harness again, tilt your head. Somewhere deep in your imagination, you picture pitching this design on a modern startup site. Elevate your dreams with the standing pharaoh experience, Tam. Uncoil your spine, realign your third eye, and levitate into morning. 5-star reviews from 0 people. Still, part of you respects the effort. It's hard not to smile, and it's even harder not to yawn. As you leave the room, you glance over your shoulder one last time. These forgotten pillows' failures or not feel oddly comforting. A reminder that even thousands of years ago, someone was tinkering with slumber, carving comfort out of stone, wondering just like you do how to make the next night's rest a little better. The torches dim as you walk away. Behind you, the room exudes a soft silence as if the pillows themselves are dozing or waiting for a new sleeper to try again. And finally, here you are at the quiet edge of it all. Beyond the chambers, past the pillow tomb and the archive of sleep scrolls, a soft corridor unrolls like a silk ribbon beneath your steps. The walls are closer here, less ornate. The torches burn lower, whispering instead of flickering. And at the end of this narrowing hallway, a single door waits half open, humming, faintly, with something you can't quite name. This is the chamber of dreams made visible. Inside it isn't stone that greets you, but fabric. Billowing linen curtains float from the ceiling like caught clouds, softening every angle of the room. Cushioned platforms circle the chamber in concentric tiers, each one bearing a single pillow, some stone, some leather, some bronze, some materials you don't even recognize. Every one of them has been used, and none of them are the same. A plaque near the entrance reads, "Resting heads through dynasties. Memory traces linger." You're not sure what that means exactly, but you like it. The air smells faintly of myrrh and something saltier, maybe dried lotus. And there's a low vibration beneath your feet, as though the room is humming a lullaby older than the Nile itself. You walk slowly now, slower than before, because something about this space demands reverence. In the center of the room, a single platform rises just slightly above the rest. Upon it lies a cracked obsidian headrest. Yes, a pillow made from volcanic glass. Ancient Egyptians believed obsidian could banish nightmares, or at least absorb them. There's even a small carved note at its base. For the pharaoh's darker dreams, historians still argue whether these dream rooms were purely spiritual or also served medical purposes. Some scholars link them to healing rites like early sleep therapy. Others think they were more symbolic, a statement about the boundary between body and soul. Either way, they fascinate researchers and insomniacs alike. You pause to lie on one of the platforms. Just for a moment, it's lined in worn papyrus and flax fiber, not exactly Tempur-pedic, but it cradles you. You can see why someone would fall asleep here and not want to leave. You picture a priestess arriving at dusk with a carved bowl of chamomile water, placing it beside the sleeper. Maybe she chants quietly. Maybe she just listens to breathing. Maybe nothing happens and yet the sleeper wakes up changed. It's hard to say what dreams do exactly, but here in this room they mattered. Remember that time you wandered through the scroll vault trying to understand dream ink formulas? Or when you tested a vertical harness and imagined turning into a sunflower? All of that led here, to this final place, where sleep wasn't a mistake or a waste of time. It was a map, a ritual, a memory you got to keep. And somewhere deep beneath your own thoughts, the idea of a stone pillow no longer seems so absurd. It's consistent, lasting, heavy enough to anchor dreams that might otherwise drift off with the morning light. One last fringe fact for you. Before we close our eyes together, there are records, serious, well-preserved records of people leaving offerings not at temples or tombs, but at the base of their pillows. Bits of silver, feathers, petals, whispers folded into linen. As if the gods weren't far off in the sky, but resting gently against the side of your face. Some things, it seems, are always worth protecting. You press your cheek against the flax. It's not soft, but it's familiar now. You've walked through a civilization's sleep, one stone pillow at a time. And you didn't just survive it, you learned how to rest like an Egyptian. The torches are low now. The chamber quiets breath by breath. Linen curtains sway gently with no wind at all. And the obsidian headrest in the center holds no pressure, no demand, just presence. You are lying still, a visitor from a far-off age, finally still enough to be forgotten. Or remembered. Either will do. Your breath slows. Sand settles. Time smooths out like cloth pressed under stars. Out beyond the walls, the Nile laps in sleepy pulses, touching reeds, ankles, stone boats that never launch. Insects hum from somewhere unseen. And even the ibis have tucked their heads under wings, deciding that tomorrow can wait. So can you. Let the night wrap around you now, like gauze soaked in chamomile. Let the dreams come fragmented or full sharp or soft. Don't chase them. They know where to find you. Just let your weight drop into stillness. There are no gods to impress, no scrolls to memorize, no ceremonies to rehearse. Only sleep, heavy as a granite headrest, and somehow just as kind.